I think we're going to get started so people can find their seats.
It's disruptive.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Good morning.
My name is Catherine Rinaldi. I'm the president of Metro North Railroad, and I'm thrilled to welcome you here to our first joint event with Amtrak, a conversation about women in rail. And before we get started, we're going to have a safety briefing.
No?
Here.
I'll do the hand mic. Yes. Thank you.
We're not?
Okay.
No, no. See?
This one looks like it's on. Okay. How about that one?
No?
No. Here.
No?
Here you go.
All right. Oh, here we go. Here we go.
I know your voice.
Somebody. All right. Okay. That was a lot for just a safety brief. But so for those of you who are not familiar with the 20th floor of this building at all, you are at 2 Broadway. You're on the 20th floor, and if there is an emergency, what you're going to hear is the alarms go off, and then their loudspeaker will come up and tell us what to do, whether we're supposed to stay in place or we're supposed to leave the building. If we're asked to leave the building, we probably will not be using the elevators. We will be using the stairwells. There are 2 stairwells that you can use. One is right outside the door here. The other one is right across from the women's bathroom, just past the elevators. We do have CPR qualified people here who can take care of that problem if it surfaces. And lastly, we also have an AED on this floor in case somebody needs that. So enjoy the day.
Thanks, Pat.
Can you hear me? Yes. So good morning. My name is Caroline Decker, and I am with Amtrak, the Vice President of our Northeast Corridor service line. And I want to thank MTA for hosting us today and really for this great turnout. When we were trying to find a date for this, Kathy and I actually started talking about this back in April.
6 months ago, yeah.
And we thought the Monday after Thanksgiving would be perfect, and it really is. I mean, as we all know, we just had one of our busiest travel holidays of the year, and so I think we're all breathing a little sigh of relief that that's in the rearview mirror. But really, thanks for turning out today. I'll tell you just very briefly before we really get into the discussion here, and we'll go down the line, and everyone, I think, is familiar with the panel. But just for some context, for the women that are here that are not with Amtrak in Notch 8, Notch 8, and many of you may know this because you're railroaders, but if you aren't familiar with some railroad terminology, Notch 8 is basically when a diesel locomotive is at full throttle. When you're at full throttle, you're at full power. And so going on 2 years ago, when a small group of women at Amtrak were working on organizing the first ever women's affinity group at Amtrak, we thought, what's our name? Branding, is very important. So before we were talking about our charter or our mission or our goals, what do we call ourselves? And happily for us, one of the founding members, a woman named Fran Burke, she came across a building in Alexandria that was called Notch 8, and it was at the site of an old railroad yard. And on the wall, it explained what Notch 8 is. And in a small group of us, and although I very much believe in a democratic process, we thought we'd have a vote on our name. We said, no, this is the name. And because we thought it's very unique to railroading, and it embodied really what we were trying to capture, and that was how do we, as women working at Amtrak, working in the transportation world, look to empower ourselves, to provide support for one another, and really achieve our fullest level of development and achievement. So that is Notch 8. And so we really welcome this opportunity. Hopefully it's the first of many going forward for us to partner and work together and really both in developing ourselves and our organization. So I will stop there. We have a lot of ground to cover today. We are thrilled that Sarah Feinberg is joining us as our moderator, and maybe Sarah, you could do a quick introduction of the rest of the panelists, and then we'll get to the program.
Sure. And I think that means my microphone's on. Perfect. So good morning. We have been planning this for months and more actively for the last few weeks. And this is a huge turnout and wonderful that all of you decided that this is what you wanted to do at 8:30 on Monday morning, which is so nice. I do want to introduce the panel, although actually I think if folks do quick introductions of themselves, that's probably best. And I know we want to jump right into the panel and then and do a little bit of conversation and Q&A up here, and then turn it over to the audience, to all of you, to ask some questions. We'll have roving microphones, and so and that's always the most interesting part, your questions as opposed to my questions. So so why don't we start down with Ronnie and do introductions, and just, I think most people are familiar with everyone here, but just a quick reminder on who you are, what you do, and how you're doing this Monday morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So I'm Ronnie Hakem. I'm the managing director here at the MTA. And so welcome to all of you who are not locally from 2 Broadway. Really glad to be participating in this conversation this morning. And I'm joined by...
Hi, I'm Susan Doring, the Executive Vice President at Metro North, and I'm happy to join all of you as well.
Good morning. I'm Elisa Pica. I'm the Executive Vice President of the Long Island Railroad. I'm thrilled to be here today and to be part of this conversation.
Great. Again, Sarah Feinberg. I'm just moderating today. I was previously the FRA administrator, the Federal Railroad Administrator, under the Obama administration, and now have my own communications firm, Feinberg Strategies. Okay.
I'm Kathy Rinaldi. I'm the president of Metro North.
You know who I am.
So maybe we'll just get at, there are not enough women in transportation, certainly not enough women in rail. I don't think there's anyone in this room who would argue that we're at saturation or anywhere close to it. And so even being a senior woman in rail or in transportation is pretty unique. And maybe we could do sort of a quick sort of run through on how folks got their interest in transportation, how they ended up in the position they're in right now. And that might be a good place to start. Caroline, actually, why don't we start at the other end?
Okay, well, I'll mine is maybe unconventional, but I don't know what is the conventional path to railroading. I really don't know. I started out really on the policy side of things, and I was born in Utah, raised in Arizona, and so it makes perfect sense that I'm the vice president of the Northeast Corridor Service Line. It was early in my youth in the desert Southwest. I thought, this is where I'm going to be. And happily for me, here I am. But I was a political science major and moved to Washington to really get involved in politics. And fortunately for me, I ended up working for a member of Congress who was the ranking member on the Railroad Subcommittee. And I got thrown into the deep end on a number of reauthorization bills, Amtrak bills, something I knew very little about, but immediately knew that it was something I was passionate about, that there was meaning in it, there was value in the work that people in transportation do and what we can contribute every day to people's lives. So that's just very high level. That introduced me to Amtrak, and then after that member that I was working for lost a election bid for the U.S. Senate, I was very fortunate enough to find a job at Amtrak and have been there on and off for about 11 years now. So again, for me, not in any way a path that I thought I would be on, but really thrilled to be here.
So I thought I had an unconventional path, and I think I do, actually. I'm a lawyer. I was an English major at Yale and went to law school at the University of Virginia and gravitated towards law clerking. I was a law clerk for a very long time. I was a clerk at the Court of Appeals in Albany, and then I clerked for other state and federal judges and wanted to be a judge. That's what I thought I was going to be when I grew up, was a judge. And what happened that sort of changed the trajectory of my career was I got a job in the Governor's Counsel's office, and I was actually hired to do do healthcare to replace somebody who was leaving, and then she never left. So they needed to find something else to do with me. So somebody left some months later who had public authorities as part of their portfolio. So transportation, energy, environment. So I gravitated towards that portfolio, and that was my first introduction to MTA and MTA's legislative agenda, and worked on that for several years when I was in Albany, and then a vacancy opened up at the General Counsel's office at MTA. So I joined MTA as General Counsel in 2003. So I've been part of the MTA family since then, and have had a number of different jobs around MTA. So I was General Counsel at HQ for several years, General Counsel at Long Island for several years, came back to HQ as the Chief of Staff, first for Joe Loda on his first sojourn at MTA, stayed on with Tom Prendergast, and then joined Metro North in 2015. And I've been president for just about a year, not quite a year.
So I have an interesting story as well. I'm actually at the railroad for 31 years this coming month, so it's I am a transportation professional, right? But of course, I did not start out in that path. I went to college for like a master's in public administration, policy analysis and public administration. So I was interested in policy. I was interested in government. Worked for New York City Office of Management and Budget for a couple years, and then just heard of a planning analyst job that was available at the Long Island Railroad, and I hadn't really thought of that as my calling. But as I learned more about it, as a small strategic group that was going to be really examining how the railroad ran and how to sort of bring it into a more modern era. And being a lifelong Long Islander, growing up near the train station, always having relatives come visit us, using the train station as part of our family, going to school in Stony Brook and using the train station, I thought, I have a little experience with this. I think I'll give it a try. And always thought, like, okay, I'll do this for a year or so and see what else is out there. But the thing about transportation is it really gets under your skin. It becomes really a part of you. And the more you know, the more important and multifaceted you find it. And the more you want to delve into more and more areas and understand them and understand how they sort of come together and form a whole. And especially at the Long Island, which is such an old traditional organization, we're chartered in 1834, so it's an old organization. And I've seen in 31 years, you've seen changes. I've seen a lot of changes. Well, there's certainly not an overabundance of women in the Long Island Railroad right now. There's plenty more than there were 31 years ago. So, I think that's something that we can build on, and that's where I'm at.
Okay, so I started on my journey toward transportation in the environmental science field, and that's what I actually went to school for. When I got out of school, I went to New York City Transit Authority in the environmental engineering department, and I was the only environmentalist in a department full of engineers. And actually, so, if you think about women in transportation, women in engineering were few and far between at that time, too. While I was there, the Future Managers Program launched in 1989. And my boss at the time, the head of the department, suggested that I apply for that. And so I did, thinking that I would have a great opportunity in training at transit. Except Metro North selected me for that program, and it was an all-agency program. So I made the leap, and I jumped from environmental engineering into this Future Managers Program, which when you completed it, you came out as a train master. And so it was a 2-year training program. I did come out as a train master. It was a tough way to actually come into transportation in management. I learned over the course of my career why that was, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But it was definitely tough coming in as a supervisor, coming in as a young woman. I was, not that far out of college. And so that was tricky. And I was working with 30-year-old railroaders. And so it was a challenging time for me. On a personal level, I was starting to raise a family. And at one point, it became obvious that I was going to have to leave the railroad. And so I did. And I stayed home to raise my children for 5 years. Obviously, I didn't raise them, but I got them started. And during that time, I found that I needed a challenge. So I actually started a New York State registered daycare out of my home, and I did that for 3 years while I was off. that didn't really get me where I wanted to be, though, and I really felt drawn to come back to the railroad. And so I reached back out, and I was offered an opportunity to come back as a conductor. And at the time, there was a management freeze, so I couldn't come back into management. I said, okay, I'll take it. So I came back as a conductor, quickly moved into locomotive engineer, became a locomotive engineer, worked for a little while as an engineer, and I know what notch 8 is. It's actually one of the coolest feelings that you can possibly have when you notch out the throttle. And so I was an engineer for a little while, and then I was eventually able to be promoted back into management. And obviously, I was in the transportation end of the business. I worked as a train master, and then I was promoted through the ranks to superintendent, and then eventually deputy chief of operations. During that time, there were a lot of things that piqued my interest: safety, customer service, training. These were the things that started to go on in my head while I was in transportation. And I started to think about how they played a role in the organization. And I also thought about, well, how am I going to play a role in the organization, and how am I going to make these things more meaningful to me? And so I thought about that. You know, when you think about your careers, you think about your next promotional opportunity, but I was thinking about, where do I want to make my contribution? And in 2009, I had the opportunity to go to Leadership APTA, another fabulous training program. And when I graduated there, a woman spoke to the class at the graduation day, and Julie Espy from LA County MTA. And she talked to us about what we were going to do in our careers. And she told us at that time, she said, be the author of your story. Don't be a character in your book. And some people who have here probably heard me say this before, but I find that to be such a meaningful statement. And it certainly was something that made me actually, I guess, have the courage to take the leap out of transportation and try something different. And the opportunity to become the vice, well, at the time it was senior director of customer service and stations. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to take a little career departure here. I'm going to go over into customer service. It was something that had been on my mind. It was something that I thought that I could contribute in that area, and so I did. And during that time, I did that back in 2010. I was promoted to vice president as more responsibilities sort of came my way. And then in 2018, when Kathy became president, she asked me if I would be executive vice president, and so here I am today.
So the one thing you didn't say is how many kids you have.
Oh yeah, so I have 4 kids. I had the first one before I started at
I was going to say in 5 years.
No. They're all grown now. They're 20 to 30 years old. But the first one I had prior to coming to transit. The second one I had, and that's when I left the railroad. I had the third one while I was away. And then, as soon as I got into locomotive engineer school, I got pregnant. And so I went through training all the way to 9 months. And I delivered my my last child at 2 weeks after I marked up as an engineer. So made for an interesting training experience for myself and actually for my classmates.
So my training experience is different than Sue's. I started in transportation when I was 6 years old, and I got my first bus pass. And so those of you who may be from Queens will remember that you had a bus pass that allowed you to get on the bus, and you took the bus to school, and you sort of had this loose affiliation with the other kids in the neighborhood. The older kids watched the younger kids, and off we went. And back in those days, on a fancy occasion day, we would take the Long Island Railroad to the city. All the other days, my mother and I would take the bus to Jamaica, to the subway, and if you ever got separated from your mother, you knew, get off at the next station and wait on the platform. So we all lived with those rules, and we grew up in transportation. Why do I say that? Because I, too, like Kathy, was a lawyer, graduated from law school, needed a job in New York. New York City Transit was hiring. I didn't realize we were at 370 J Street, I think, in some of the same time periods, Sue. And so off I went to Brooklyn. And it started a wonderful experience for me because why? It was so tangible, the work that we were doing in transportation. I knew it. I knew it from when I was a kid. I rode those buses. I rode the wicker seat subway cars. I knew what it felt like to try to reach for the hand handrail and not be tall enough, and the value that we provide and we continue to provide in this environment. So my training, while different, was as tangible, I think, as everybody else's here.
I love those stories, but what strikes me, and Sue, I'm pretty sure you're the toughest woman I've ever met.
She is.
Yeah, wow. And I can imagine your classmates when you would sort of waddle around, and I only say waddle because I've been there, at 8 and 9 months pregnant, getting on and off locomotives. I'm sure it was an experience. So, but what strikes me about all those stories is all of the different ways this group sort of ended up where they are. Policy on the Hill, lawyer, law clerk, MTA, policy, engineering, 6-year-old bus pass. And so, I mean, first of all, to this room, I would say there's no one in this room that can't use or find one of those paths to get to whatever position you want to be in transportation. You know, what I am constantly, what I frequently am thinking about is how can we get more women into transportation? I think once you're exposed to railroading, to transportation, it's so fascinating, and Ronnie, to use your term, tangible. Like, it impacts people's lives so much. That's one of the things that attracted me to it. Once you're exposed to it and you think of the possibilities of working in transportation, I think we've sort of got women, right? Once they're thinking about it and interested in it. But you know, it sort of takes a lot to get the message to women that this is such a good career field. This is such an interesting way to impact people's lives. You know, before I came here this morning, I was dropping my stepdaughter off at school, and she was so annoyed that we were taking the subway, which is both my way of like making her. She loves to take Uber, and I'm like, no, you're a New York City kid. First of all, you're contributing to the problem when you get in an Uber, to the congestion issue, and two, like, you're a New York City kid. We're riding the subway, and anyway, and she was like, why do you always make me ride the subway? And I'm like, well, first of all, because I'm a railroad person, and second of all, because this is like how you become exposed to like the city and the world and every culture in this city. And like every morning, MTA executes something amazing, which I think of as a miracle every day, which is they get millions and millions of people to work at about the same time every day, sometime between 6:45 and 9:30 or whatever. And I think it's important to see that. And I think when people are exposed to that and learn about it, it's irresistible. But I think we need to do more to make people interested in it in the first place. And one of the things I talk about all the time is that it's literally, you could not have a bigger impact than the way people commute every day and the way people get home to their families and get to their jobs. But I know you all are all thinking about this too. So how do you talk to women and girls about why they should think about railroading, why they should think about transportation? And anyone can jump in. I don't need to be in charge of this.
Well, I'll start. One, I think just if we look around the room, what's really great is that we see multi generations, a very diverse group. I think I read recently, we're in a time where there are 5 generations of people in the workforce. We have, and we all bring, again, such diversity in terms of our ideas and ways to improve the quality of the delivery of our service. So when I'm number one with interns or people that are thinking about Amtrak, I'm very passionate about what I do, and the good news is there's no brand confusion about us, right? No one says, well, what's Amtrak? No one has ever, certainly people have opinions, and I'm ready to take them, the good, the bad. But no one ever says, well, what's Long Island Railroad? People know, right? They know. We are very relevant. There's a relevance, and it's not to say that anyone else in any other field, they are irrelevant. There's relevance, but we are super relevant, and we're really important, again, in the daily lives of people. And I think when you look at the future, and it's, who knows what the future means? Who knew 10 years ago what this would mean to our lives, right? We have no idea what the future holds in terms of transportation. Some things I think we know are always going to be they're going to be just sort of a fact of life, but we just don't know. And so I think there's one, you can look to the youth and the people that are saying, well, what I want to work in tech. Well, we're all about tech, right? I mean, if we aren't all about tech and transportation, then we should just go home. But we also know we're very much a human to human business, and that we rely, one, the delivery of our service, it depends on, again, talking about customer service, our people, and we're moving people. And so there's nothing to me that is really more powerful and meaningful. And I think that bodes well too for when you look at the millennials and the Gen Z, people that are coming into the workforce that really want to make a difference in people's lives. I mean, that's really all about what we do. So I'm very optimistic about the future. And again, I absolutely know, though, when I look around the senior ranks at Amtrak, that there is room for a lot of improvement in diversity, in gender equality. We've got a lot of work to do, but I know that there's a lot of talent that's interested in sort of joining this field.
I think in order to attract more women, that we can be the advocates, that we up here and our peers and our all of the women in our organization, when you have such a passion for what you do, it's contagious. And I see this. I have a daughter in her 20s, and some of her friends will come to me and say, well, you seem to really like what you do. What is it that you do? So I think that when you have that passion, you really believe that what you're doing is the right thing. When you go to work every day trying to figure out, how can I make this better? How can I look at this a little bit differently? How can we get this in on budget, on time, that sort of thing? I think that it's contagious, and we have to look. We have to look, and try to encourage women graduating college and open that door and expose them to all that transportation means. Because I think you've heard everybody say that it washes over you sort of in waves what it means. It's marketing. It's person to person. It's an important part of people's lives. And then I think we have to, as we attract women to the workforce, we have to retain them. That we have to show them that this organization is a good place to grow, to put down roots, to have an influence, that there's mentors there, that there's training there, and that they will look around and assess an organization and see who has the reach, who has, how's this organization operating? Is there really a future for me? Is there a next step, a next path? And that's something at the Long Island Railroad we've been trying to do as of late, and it's not the first time it's been tried, but we really see this hunger for mentorship and for just sort of getting together. We can't solve our problems, but we can sort of talk them through and share experiences and perspectives. And I think that retention is a really important part of getting people, not only in the door, but staying in the door and growing into these larger positions. The other thing I think we have at the Long Island Railroad that we really need to tout more is the fact that we have a once in 100-year change that's going to be happening in 4 years. So if you're a woman at the railroad, if you're thinking of a railroad career, that's just a tremendous opportunity to show your stuff, to figure out where you want to be when Long Island Railroad takes that first train into Grand Central and we're providing service to 2 Manhattan terminals. A change the likes of which we haven't seen since we opened up Penn Station, the East River Tunnels. That's exciting. What do you want to be doing? Do you want to be dispatching trains? Do you want to be doing timetables? Do you want to be doing the budget? Do you want to be working with customers one-on-one and reacquainting with them with how to use the railroad? That's an opportunity to be a change agent in our time, and I think those are the things that we have to double down on and really promote in order to attract more women.
So I don't think we've actually done it right. If we had done it better, there would be more women in this industry, and there would be more women as part of the MTA organization. So that calls for self-reflection. We're in the teens in terms of representation of women in our workforce. I had the benefit of being in the law department when I was a young mother, and so the law department had women in senior positions. It was just the nature of that department, unlike many of the other departments in New York City Transit. And so I was able to take maternity leave. I was able to come back and work part-time I didn't work part-time well because I kept working on my days off, but I was working part-time. I had a support system at work of mentors, men and women, who said to me, you have a career path here. Let's invest in you. Let's send you for training. Let's send you to those leadership programs. And that made a big difference because people talked to me about my career path. So I'm going to ask you all, are you talking to people in your departments about their career path? Do you ask your own bosses about your career path? Do you force those conversations? Because I would like to think that we want to be an employer of choice for everyone, right? Those words, diversity and inclusion, they have to be core values for us. They have to matter. And so for them to matter, we have to talk about them in the workplace. Not just with your pals, but with your supervisors up and down, right? You manage up and you manage down. And so, I challenge us to really try to say, how do we become more of an employer of choice? Some of us have worked together on some HR issues, and, we're trying to look at, is telecommuting an option that we can offer our employees? Does that work for a segment of our population? Is it possible for us to offer part-time work schedules? Is flex time something that can work in some of our departments? Not every place, but sometimes maybe that can make a difference of retaining somebody. And is the work that we're offering people, you use the word relevance, I love that word, right? Do you understand how relevant the work that you're doing is? And so all of that is about communicating that we value you in this employee and in this employment context. So I think it's a challenge for us and one that we need to do better at.
But even having the conversation about part-time work, flex time, are you talking to your manager, are you talking to your team about it, is a breath of fresh air in an industry like transportation, which is typically, no, you show up at 7, you work the 10-hour shift or you work the 12-hour shift, and we don't talk about it, and you will sort of step up when you step up.
And then you die in your boots.
And then you die, and then you die, and then you die. Right, lovely, thank you. We probably have, why don't we shift to questions from the audience, and I'll keep interspersing some questions too, but I want to make sure folks feel like they have an opportunity to ask questions. Okay, so we have a hand up, and I don't know, we can distribute mics, or you can just be really loud.
I'm not sure it's on.
Thank you so much for having this wonderful event and for inviting us all to be part of this very important conversation and to be allowed in this space to have this conversation. This is a wonderful thing that's a testament to the organization. One thing that I wonder about is as a person formerly from an operating title, I also know the joy of Run 8. And as I'm now more in the office, I don't have some of the benefits that I previously had, and I know that some of my colleagues don't have those benefits. In relation to maternity and paternity leave in New York State, there's been changes with maternity leave and by extension paternity leave for most employees, but for those of us who don't work under a TWU contract or maybe certain other unions, we don't necessarily have those same benefits. I know that I was looking out of curiosity because I'm at a childbearing age of sorts, child-making age, perhaps, shall we say.
I think the group up here would confirm that you are not going to be bearing any children.
Right. And
perhaps you're speaking for your partner.
But I would like to mention this issue because as I've spoken to some of my colleagues who are in similar age brackets, it is a concern of being away, and of course these are challenges that many of you have faced, and it's nice to hear those stories. Moving forward as an organization, what are some of the things that we might be able to do what are some things we might be looking forward to towards making progress on that front for expectant mothers and for their partners who maybe work at the agency or otherwise?
Sure. I mean, I think that it's becoming more and more clear as time goes by that this is not really an issue simply for women, and it's not simply an issue for childbearing women or women of childbearing age. I mean, really, people throughout the course of their careers will need to take time away from work for whatever reason. So they will have children at home, they will have aging parents. There are many opportunities along the continuum of your career where you may need to take time away. And I know that under the auspices of the group that Ronnie is working on, we're trying to figure out ways to be able to incorporate into the way we do business the ability to sort of step away, because I do think that to be an employer of choice, to Ronnie's point, we need to be more flexible with respect to a lot of those issues than we've been historically. I mean, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and I think to Sarah's point, there was a real sense that this is a transportation agency, all hands on deck all the time, really hard to distinguish between the operating people who need to be here in all kinds of weather, whatever happens, and everybody else. And I think we're still coming to terms, frankly, with how to reconcile being a transportation provider with having the sort of flexibility in terms of how we offer our services to be able to make ourselves an employer of choice. And we're not there yet. We're still trying to think that stuff through. But I think the fact that we are trying to think that stuff through and are sort of sensitive to the need to think that stuff through, I think is frankly a good sign in terms of being able to attract more people to the workforce and retain them once they're here.
So to do a quick public service announcement for the MTA folks that are in this room, everybody here who works for an MTA agency should know what your rights are. And if you need to talk to your HR professionals, do so. Family leave, what are your available days? What are your rights? You need to know that. What are your health benefits? To make sure that you are really aware of what are all of the value that comes from being a part of our enterprise. One of the things that we're trying to do is to get those messages out. So I don't want anybody to leave here without knowing that you have the ability to get in touch with an HR professional. Anita Miller, am I correct? Correct. Thank you. And get all of those answers to your questions. I don't want you at all equivocating about what rights you have.
Hi, good morning, everyone. So my question is, for the position or to be successful, you may be qualified for that position or that department that you're in, but you're not a fit or they don't see you as a fit. How do you retain that position? Like you're being qualified, but you're not being seen as fitted for that position, or you're not welcome in that department, meaning like you stand out and at the same time you're not receiving the support.
Yeah, I think, so if I was faced with that situation, I think I would do a lot of personal self-evaluation. I think I'm probably my hardest critic, and I do try to understand my strengths, my weaknesses, as I see them, but I also try to understand how other people see them. And I think managing your either your experience, your skills, your perspective to those strengths and challenges, both as like I said, as you see them and others do, and then try to improve upon them. Look for someone, a mentor, who can help you. Look for training opportunities that may be able to improve a certain knowledge base. And that can be internal or it could be external. You can go to classes that we offer here through MTA, and I'm not sure which agency you work for, but each of the agencies have their own, but you can also look for extended training in the other agencies. That's available to you as well. And then look outside the organization for that kind of educational assistance that you can get. Maybe you need some skill building or certifications. That might help. I'm not quite sure where you're coming from and going to. The other thing is, we talked about mentorships. Find someone that you can talk to that'll give you real advice. When I took one of my positions, it was actually the deputy chief position. There were some things that I didn't feel comfortable with in my own strengths, I guess. And I reached out to someone directly, and I said, this is the problem that I think I'm going to have in this role. How can you help me? I see you do it well. How can you help me? You know, this person knew me. And I've done that actually multiple times, but I remember that one in particular because it was a particular vulnerability that I felt I had. And so I would reach out and try and find that. I would also talk to your HR department and find out, you know, what they see as your challenges are in looking towards that next position, whether it's the one you were trying to get to or maybe some other one that might be good for you as well.
The other thing that I would add to that is, to the extent that you can, look for the opportunity for stretch assignments in the work that you have now. You know, try to challenge yourself in your current job and sort of put yourself out there as somebody who wants to take on more responsibility. I think stretch assignments, I think, are an important part of developing a promotional path for yourself, but also developing the relationships that are helpful in terms of advancing in the company.
Question here.
Good morning, ladies. My name is Tori Baker, and I'm an analyst for New York City Transit for 3 years. My question to you is, what advice would you give to yourself 3 years in the job?
That's a great question. You know, it's very interesting because 3 years into the job, you are really, and especially in a transportation environment, you're really beginning to put a few pieces together. You're really beginning to see how things work, and you're trying to not only understand the business that you're in, but how it's run, what the leadership is like, what they seem to like, what direction you're taking. So I think the advice that I would give to a 3-year person or to my 3-year tenured person is to just stay with it. You know, learn the things, you know, find that new thing and become a little bit of an expert in it. Attach yourself to somebody who really looks like they have the organization's best interest at heart, and try to find out what can you do to, you know, to be a part of that team. There's always so much that goes on within our organizations. You know, like we have our brown bag lunches, or there's, you know, the Santa train, or, you know, there's different corporate events. Be a part of that. Really get immersed in the fabric of your organization, and keep your options open, because you never know what path is going to come find you. So be open to even more change, a little bit of risk, especially when you're there 3 years. You really can afford to go in a couple of different directions, and just learn all you can to become that valuable resource.
I would just add, I think that's a great question, and to just also just stay open to possibilities. You know, you may find yourself, you're on a certain trajectory, but there could be something else that comes along, and don't limit your thinking or think. I think women often have a tendency to say, well, I've been trained in X, Y, and Z, or I've been educated in this, that, and the other thing, so that's not a position that I should apply for, when really you can put yourself out for anything, you know, and really your only limitations are those that you put on yourself. So really to just sort of keep your mind open and your options open, and there's no telling, you know, where you may end up.
Yeah, the one thing that I would add too is we at Metro North, we have this program called Lunch and Learns. We have these monthly lunches where we just talk about different topics. And I don't know, maybe a year or so ago, we did a lunch and learn on people who advanced through the company by sort of jumping from department to department. So Sheryl Sandberg and Lean In called it a jungle gym approach. So as opposed to the corporate ladder, it's a jungle gym, and you sort of jump from one department to another. Sue did that. I mean, Sue's a perfect example of somebody who is very successful by sort of looking for opportunities, not necessarily in the ladder that you would expect, but sort of being open to opportunities elsewhere. And we had a whole panel of people who had a story like that. So I think it's a question of keeping your eyes and your ears open with respect to what might else be out there, making the connections. I think mentorships are incredibly important, but also I think, excuse me, you need to sort of make yourself vulnerable by asking for help. I think that you really, you form the relationships in the company not only by showing what you do know, but by asking for help when you don't know something. Because people want to help, and people want to be there for you as you advance through the company and are sort of making that journey for yourself.
Good morning, ladies. My name is Yanelle Baptiste from the Long Island Railroad Department of Program Management. And my question to you, since all of you have different background, and as well as most or all of the women here is, what competencies do you feel is important to be in a leadership position, and how did you gain those skills?
So I'll start. Being prepared is important. So that means asking a lot of questions, understanding the operation that you're dealing with. So, you know, some of you have heard that among the things that I was working on as a lawyer had to do with how do you fuel buses. Well, I didn't know how to fuel buses. I did not take that class in law school. But I did get my butt over to a depot and learn everything I could about fueling buses. Or going to signal school. I didn't understand the signal system, but I knew if I was going to be working on these big contracts, I should kind of understand what that was, going to signal school. Being prepared, having a good attitude, asking a lot of questions, and being genuinely interested in the work, I think are some of the competencies that helped me as I was coming up.
I found the most important things that I could have done in my work in transportation involved critical thinking and problem solving. And I felt that those two skills, I was fortunate that, you know, I was a math and science major, and so a lot of that was built into my educational background. But I think that you know, coming to work in transportation in particular every day is different, you know, and you have to be able to start with the knowledge base that Ronnie was talking about, and becoming knowledgeable and you know, a subject matter expert in many different areas. But then you need to be able to take those skills and you need to be able to work with them to think critically through what is happening, you know, from one day to the next. And we do face many challenges on a pretty regular basis, problem solving. You know, recognizing the resources you have, whether it's people, whether it's tools, whether it's equipment, whether it's a line that's open, and, you know, navigating through those difficulties on a daily basis. Those were two of the most important. That and communication, I think, is the other one. Being able, you know, we talk about that, you know, you heard what I said, how does it go? What does Kevin say? This is what I said, what did you hear? Yeah, just to make sure that's a two-way communication, that what's being said is what's being heard, and there's good understanding. I think those are probably the most helpful that I've seen over the years.
So I can only enhance the attributes that were previously discussed, because I definitely you know, think similarly, communications and preparedness. So to that I would add a couple of things. I would add ability to listen, because there's a lot of people that want to tell you information, and that goes to communication, I guess, because sometimes they tell it to you directly, sometimes they come at you indirectly, and I think the ability to just discern personality types and people's different comfort levels and ways of communicating. So a lot of technical areas within the operations that we work in. We cannot master them all, but you know, but we don't need to be the masters of them. We need to understand how they come together and what vulnerabilities there may be in one particular area that we better focus. How do you drift through all the different issues out there to focus on something that's going to be the critical, you know, on the critical path. So I think listening is very important. And I think in terms of stepping up to an executive role and a leadership role, I think it's a willingness to take a risk, right? You're going to have to find yourself in waters that you're not immediately familiar with, that the people that report to you are going to know a lot more about them than you. How do you become a leader to those people because you respect what they do, you understand what they do? I might not be able to push them out of the way and do their job that day, but I know how it fits into the bigger picture. So that willingness to be vulnerable, to open yourself up to that risk, to step out on that ledge a little bit, and it's a little scary when you do that, but have that confidence to know. I think I reached a turning point in my career when I figured, well, nobody knows that whole scope of work. So why not me? You know, I know a lot, and I'm very dedicated. I'm willing to work hard, and I think I have a good sense of the big picture. So I think that, you know, you find that right moment and opportunity for you, and you step out, and you do your best, and you're decisive, not to equivocate. You know, you can. It's best to make a decision, and if it's the wrong decision, you're going to know, and then you can correct it, as opposed to sort of waiting for that perfect alignment of inspiration to come along.
Yeah, the other thing I would say is as someone who's managed a lot of people over the years, the core competencies that I sort of look for in someone I'm managing is, how do they react to obstacles in their path? Nothing, particularly if you're managing, dozens, hundreds. I mean, and some of the women up here are managing thousands, tens of thousands of people. How do you react to an obstacle in your path? Do you say, oh, well, that person never called me back, so I haven't executed on that thing you told me to do a week ago because didn't call me back. I'm like, oh, well, then what did you do? Did you call them? Did you leave 10 voicemails? Did you go to their office? So you got to be willing to work around the thing, work around whatever the problem is, because ultimately managers are looking for you to solve the problem and execute on the assignment, and you will rise right to the top. If you're the person on a team, the person on the floor in the department that solves the problems, that finds the way to yes, you're gonna sort of float to the top really quickly. That's one thing I look for.
So Elisa said it briefly, but I want to sort of build on it a little bit. Respect. I think it's unbelievably important to respect the people that you're dealing with, because as Elisa said, you can't possibly know everything. God knows I don't know everything about the railroad, but I need to give respect to the people that I'm engaging with and expect respect in return, actually. It needs to be a two-way street. I think it's incredibly important. The other thing that I would say, which is a more tangible skill that's really helped me enormously in my career, and I think the lawyers will be gratified to hear this, I know how to write, and writing is unbelievably important in this job. So I think the fact that I'm a good writer has helped me enormously in every single job I've had in the MTA. So it's a skill worth cultivating, because I do think it provides a lot of opportunity for advancement in different parts of the company, right? It's a skill that stands you, in good stead wherever you are in the company.
So everything's really been said, but I want to just add a couple of things. One, Ronnie started out with preparation, and I'll invoke this person's name, but I don't know if they're fans. My mother is a huge LeBron James fan. She lives in Arizona. I don't know how this happened, but she, and if you've ever heard him, he says the secret to his success is prepare, prepare, prepare. You can just never be over prepared. So I think, and then that is really foundational to everything else. And then Elisa invoked the word confidence. So when you're prepared, you're confident. You go to the meeting, you go to the event, you're ready, right? And if you're not confident, people know that. And so I encourage everyone, you really need to work on that. For some people, it's a little more innate. Maybe you're more extroverted, but even if you're an introvert, you can project competence and confidence. And a funny story I'll tell you, just because I've never shared this story, but this seems like a good time to share it. When I was very small, and we were living in Nevada at the time. I promise we weren't fugitives of the law. It seems like we were all over the West. We spent a little bit of time in Nevada. My mother who was a stay-at-home mom at the time, was the troop leader for, it was Bluebirds, which was just before Brownies. So we were 5 years old, and we were doing a variety show. So we had to do a song and a dance. And my mom, this was 1975, we did I Am Woman, Hear Me Roar. We sang that song, and we did hand motions, and we memorized it. And I've got to say, I think when you're 5 years old and you say, I am strong, I am invincible, I am woman, that resonates. And so I really thank my mom. Obviously, my mom and dad, they had a lot to do with it. But those are words, and honest to God, I say those to myself still to this day, going into a meeting when I know I need to deliver. So whatever that mantra is, or those words, find that and project it. Bring it, really bring it, and you'll find people will respond. And I'll tell my mom I shared this story today.
I noticed that all of you up there today are in operating capacity. What about women that are in the BSc, women in IT? I know that the MTA IT budget is starved. And you say that we have tech. Well, we have a very demoralized tech force, me being one of them. And I want to know how you are going to change that, because you depend, everyone in this room depends on their support services. And feels on really shaky ground to me. I have not had a promotion in place for 12 years. Now you ask me, why do I stay in such a job? because the job itself and the work I do is very challenging to me, and everyone in this room depends on my work. So I'm very conscious of that. I'm very conscious of doing a good job. You know, I volunteer here a lot. I don't get paid for overtime, but I'm not a manager. So how are you going to help people like me do better? How are you going to support the women in IT? How are you going to support the women at the BSC that make sure all of the HR services that need to happen?
So let me start, if you don't mind. Let me start by saying thank you for your service. Really, we appreciate the fact that it takes all different kinds of support work to make this place run, right? It's not just the frontline employees, it's people in procurement, it's people in IT, it's people who manage our payrolls, it's people who manage to answer those HR questions when the phone rings, right? That somebody's on the other end of that line. Having events like this is part of the employee engagement that we want to demonstrate. Yes, budgets have been tough. They are continuing to be tough. You know, we have been trying to budget in sort of those increases so that we can get back to normalcy in terms of what you can plan for you and your family. We're all in this together. I think it's important for us to look up and to say, yeah, we have a way to go. Not perfect, still trying, and we're working at it. So I would say try to stay engaged. Thank you for coming this morning. I think that's an important part of it. And be part of the conversation that we're having so that we can make good employee choices and keep you engaged in the work that you're doing. And I say that writ large to everybody in the room.
Good morning. Thank you, ladies, for being here and sharing your insight with us. I'm Lisa Stenson Desimores, a Senior Associate Counsel in Metro North Railroad's Legal Department. And I was curious to know if each of you have had mentors in your journey who have shared advice that was instrumental in your ascension to your current roles.
Probably all have. We can do like a quick round of just going from one end to the other. Does that make sense, Carly?
Unquestionably, although I wouldn't say that I had any sort of formal mentor, I think I've been incredibly fortunate throughout my life, even going back to jobs in college when I worked on campus, to internships where I worked for people that were incredibly giving to me in terms of sharing their experiences, guiding me. And again, going back to some of the discussion from earlier, I'm very inquisitive. What can I learn from you? What should I know? How can I be better? So I can't pin it down to one person. There have been many, and I'm very grateful. I'm very fortunate, and I think that's where we all have the opportunity to recognize there's someone that can learn from you, and you can learn from someone else, and so we all have that capability. But so the answer is yes, but more than I can even can go through it in one sitting, really.
Yeah, I would say the same. I mean, I've had any number of people over the course of my career be supportive of my path, be willing to engage with me in terms of what the next step might be, and challenge me when I want to pull back a little bit, because sometimes, I can't remember who said it, maybe Lisa said it, I mean, sometimes you take risk when you sort of figure out what the next step is going to be, and it's easy to pull back, or it's easier to pull back, maybe. So let me give you the most recent example. The most recent example of that is my ascension to Metro North President, which, can I tell you, was never a job I thought I would have. It's a wonderful job. It's a challenging job. I never expected to have a job like this. I'm unbelievably fortunate, but I never expected to have a job like this. So I was acting president for, I don't know, 6-7 months before ultimately being named the permanent president of Metro North. And Joe Giuletti kind of gave me a kick in the butt. It's like, go for this. I mean, you know, put yourself out there. Make it clear that this is something that you want. I, ultimately put my fears to the side and put myself out there as somebody who wanted this job. And every day is a challenge for me. I mean, believe me, every day. And some days are more challenging than others. But you need to sort of take that risk and sort of face, my 5-year-old says, face your fears. You have to face your fears, put yourself out there, recognize that some days are going to be harder than others. And, and I think the good mentors are the ones who sort of push you to face your fears and push you to look at what you can do and push you to do it anyway, even though you have those fears.
Great examples. I mean, I sort of think of my mentors as people I've learned stuff from over the years. So I've certainly been lucky enough to have a couple people here and there who have, advocated for me if I've wanted a job or something. But generally, it's not a person that you go to and say, will you be my mentor? It's just folks who over the course of your, the position you're in, that they know everything, or they've been there 20 years, or they've done much more than you have. Or, I mean, Pat Warren, for example, was a mentor of mine in terms of teaching me how to lead big teams, because he has led massive teams, and no one is better at steering a big ship in a different direction than Pat. Bob Lobby at FRA was a mentor of mine because he knew much more about safety than I did when I arrived. But I've had some bad experiences in being a mentor, so I will just give this room some advice. When you are asking someone to be your mentor, they're generally always going to say yes. I mean, we want to be helpful to young women, to women and to young men too, people who are in a part of their career where they want some guidance and are thinking about next steps. But what is not particularly rewarding is when someone says, will you be my mentor? And you say yes, and then they say, okay, what should I do? It's a two-way street. It's sort of, we want to hear from you on what you're thinking about, what you're interested in. It's not, I've asked someone to be my mentor, check, therefore they will just take the phone call they will just do this for me. They will get it done for me. I've also had people ask for a mentor, and then, I'm waiting at Starbucks for 20 minutes and that they, are running 30 minutes late. And it's, you get it. I totally get it. But it's like, engage, respect and engage the person you've asked to take a real interest in your career and to really put time in, because it's, it's a real investment in you, and so it's a two-way street, and it's a real relationship.
So I think I would agree that I've been both a mentor and I've mentored others, and it's always been an informal relationship. You just kind of find each other. Either it's a manager or a leader that you report to and respect, or somebody that you see in the organization who's really talented and could just use a hand, a leg up, or a little advice or some encouragement. And so I've been very fortunate to always really work for strong leaders, not so much, oh, let me tell you how great you're doing, but just who led by example and made you want to be as close to, as good as this person as you could be. And to me, that was very instrumental in my development. There's one mentor that I had, or one leader that I had, that made me see myself differently, probably like mid-career, early to mid-career, who was the chief engineer. I worked in his department, and I always did capital program plans and things like that, and worked very diligently and intelligently, and gave him insights into things that I worked on, and learned a lot from him. And I remember him calling me into his office. I'd given some information, and he was very strategic. Was very a good chess player, and I'm more. Oh, you need information? Here's information. So he sort of would take the time to share with me his perspective on how the organization works, and this is what you should do in that situation. This is what you should do in that situation. And I remember him saying to me, Elisa, I just want you to go so high. And I could almost, be brought to tears just thinking about that. Like, this person saw something in me, and I had great respect for him. He was a very talented individual. And he saw something in me that was worth investing and worth sort of sitting down and sort of tell me about the ways of the world as well as the ways of the railroad. And so sometimes you do have that pivotal moment when you say, hey, if that person sees this inside of me, maybe there really is something there that I need to see myself and pursue.
I think my first mentor was my dad. And I say that because as a child, I remember sitting at the dinner table at night, and we always had dinner at 6:30. And he would come in and he would sit down and he would tell my mom about the day that he had. And basically about the work that he was doing and decisions that he made and questions that were asked of him. And I remember sitting there and just sucking that up like crazy. I remember many of his stories still to this day. And so I do credit my dad as being my very first mentor. And I don't know how much he knows it, but I do know that he's enjoyed watching my career. He did work at Transit, yeah. So he was my first mentor. When I went to the Future Managers Program, I was given a mentor. So that was, like I said, it was a 2-year training program. And so I had a formal mentor for 2 years. I mean, I really had the benefit of some great training and some great investment. And, you know, I would suggest that you take advantage of every opportunity that you can to invest in your development. And so I had him. He was a railroader from ever ago. I think he was, before Metro North was Metro North, he was a railroader. And he was assigned to me. And I learned a lot about him. That goes to your point about being a subject matter expert. I learned a lot about transportation and operations and the movement of trains. And frankly, you know, as somebody, a newcomer into the railroad, I needed that. I needed that expertise. Because to really be effective, you have to have credibility. And so finding the mentor that's going to help you to get past your weaknesses and get past your challenges is really key at all stages in your career. And so that was my first official mentoring. Over the course of time, I've latched on to people and learned from them too. And I listened to stories, I listened to how people make decisions, I listened to priorities, and I try and get understanding from all kinds of people. And I also had the benefit of, in transportation, I was not the first woman moving through the ranks at Metro North. There was one ahead of me. And I did have the benefit of learning from her, too, and watching her and see how she managed her way through transportation. Her style was not my style, but I certainly learned a lot from her. She was very skilled at what she did. And I thought that was very helpful to have somebody that I could really observe. More recently, I have had the opportunity of being a mentor. Metro North did have mentor programs, and I was a mentor, a formal mentor with a very structured program, 2 times. I did that, and then I've had people actually ask to come in and talk to me. So I've been on both sides of, and people throughout Metro North in all different levels, which I find extremely flattering that somebody would be coming to me to look for that. And so if you're thinking about it and you're cautious, oh, what are they going to think? I don't know. Should I ask? Blah, blah. Go ask, because they probably want, really, they probably want to be able to share with you. And so, and it is quite flattering, and certainly there's benefits on both sides. Mentoring someone else gives you different insight as well. And it's important, that two-way relationship is very, very important. So I definitely see the benefits of both formal mentoring as well as informal mentoring and learning.
So we've all heard how we have had a series of mentoring relationships that have informed and helped us to evolve. One that strikes with me was not a formal mentoring relationship, but it taught me, and it's something we haven't talked about this morning, the value of empathy. And so being in the moment with people who are going through hardship. Kathy's 5-year-old who says, face your fears. Well, let me tell you guys, there's nothing like facing your fears when you're outside of a hospital room, right? Those are fearful moments. And when you get to that hospital and you have to deal with a family who is going through a tragedy of epic proportion, how do you do that, right? You have to be present. You have to be emphatic. You have to really understand what they're going through. So just to bring slight humor to tragedy, one evening, it's middle of the night, I'm there and I'm with the wife of somebody who's not going to make it. And it's the difference between, I think, a woman and a man in this situation, right? So the guys want to know, what would you like to eat? Like, what? You know? And I had a different response to that, right? My response was, are you prayerful? Should we pray together? Is your family on its way? Can we get your son back from work? How can we help you? You know, that empathy was something that I learned from somebody who was an invaluable part of my career build. Not somebody, by the way, who was higher than me on the ladder, but somebody who really understood how to connect with people. So look for it, right? You look for it in many different places. May not be up, may be around you, may be below, but look for it.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Yvette Junior Holder, and I work for MTA IT under the Metro North Railroad umbrella. I just want to shift the conversation back to workforce development and succession planning. How do we get more women involved, et cetera? One of the things that I've noticed is that succession planning from schools into our career entry levels and then beyond, there's a disconnect. So one of the things that I've done is I've joined a lot of nonprofit organizations, WTS, Conference of Minority Transportation Officials, and not just joined them from a member perspective, but also participated in committees and also led from a presidential role as well. I find in our schools, our children know how to utilize our system. Some of us can tell us some things that we don't even know when we're working in some of the administrative roles, but there's a disconnect as to when you say, what would you like to do in your future? Many of them don't look at transportation as an option. So I think they really translate to things that are hands-on experiences. So how do we create more hands-on experiences for our high schools and even our junior high schools so that they can understand how some of these careers that they're thinking about, like engineering, et cetera, to transition into the transportation industry?
I actually agree with that assessment a lot. I think that there's a real lack of understanding out there as to how many opportunities exist within the transportation industry. I mean, I think people think of conductors and engineers and ticket sellers, but they don't necessarily know the range of challenging careers that exist within the transportation sector. So I think to your point about we really need to do a better job of educating young people as to how they can build a very challenging career within transportation. So Metro North is trying to do some of those things, and I think there's always opportunity for more. We have had for many years a very robust internship program, and the interns are embedded in all. You were an intern, stand up. And so we you know, and the internship program has also been a good opportunity for us to increase the diversity of the workforce. We have women, we have minorities. We've been much better in terms of trying to have a more diverse, broadly representative workforce within our internship program. We have the associate engineer program, which has been also enormously, there you go, also enormously successful with respect to getting people in the pipeline and getting really wonderful experience. The challenge that we're facing now is getting them to stay. So getting them salaries and experiences such that they want to build their career at the railroad, but at least it's a foot in the door with respect to getting people there. We're trying to, through our HR department, form partnerships with high schools to try to educate young people with respect to the broad ranges of experiences and opportunities within the transportation sector. I think it's a way of attracting more people in, but also a way potentially of building up the diversity of the workforce, both from a gender perspective as well as trying to increase minority hiring, because it is a place where we're particularly challenged. I mean, Ronnie said it a little while ago. Metro North currently has 13% women in the workforce. That is not a number that we are very proud of, that I am very proud of. That's a number that requires a lot of effort to try to address that. One of the other things that we're doing, and I'm looking at Mary Maselli, who is in our capital engineering group, has built up a group of women engineers who are meeting on a periodic basis to talk about a lot of these workplace issues, a lot of issues with respect to how to work-life balance and what can we do to try to make the workplace more attractive to women so that they want to stay and build their careers here. So this women engineer group essentially is kind of a pilot for, I think, other affinity groups and other groups across the railroad, so that we can sort of build up those opportunities to sort of talk about how we make the workplace more attractive to women. But we do have a couple of other, a couple of different things in the pipeline to try to build up that pipeline, to try to build up more interest and more appreciation for the broad range of opportunities that exist within the transportation sector.
I'll just add at Amtrak, because we've got some of my colleagues from Amtrak that are here today, and I don't know if anyone went through the management associate program, anyone here, but oh good, okay, oh yes, so they're excellent. I'm glad you're raising your hands. So that is similar to, I think, maybe some of the efforts Kathy was talking about, a robust program at Amtrak that really in recent years I think continues to grow. And I know over the weekend, I'm out of Washington, D.C., but I was volunteering in the station to help with some of the surge of customers that we have. And a number of our management associates were out helping. They are the future of Amtrak. And I think as we all know, we have a workforce in railroading that is going to be facing a mass exodus in terms of the people that were here, for majority of the time, at least for Amtrak, that we've been in business. So we have got to. It's not a matter of wouldn't it be nice. It is essential, that we really attract and retain the leaders of the future. Amtrak will be turning 50 in 2021. We've got a few milestones coming up for us, but it's really in the next couple of years that we're going to see a big turnover. So we're doing everything that we can, and obviously our territory goes beyond the Northeast Corridor across the country. So we've got a lot of work to do, but I'm encouraged that our HR department and our CEO are really focused on that kind of important recruitment.
Sit on. Oh, okay. Why don't we do one more question and then we'll do like a quick lightning round or something.
Hi, my name is Danielle Cunningham. I work at Amtrak in scheduling and contest planning, and I was able to hear that a lot of you said that in advancing your career, confidence is a huge part of it. How do you maintain your confidence? I guess when you know you're qualified, you have the answer, but you don't want to come across as combative, or do you know what I'm saying? And obviously you're in a room with, strong personalities. How do you guys maintain your confidence without being the catty person per se, and I guess and still be marketable in such a niche industry?
Great question. I bet we all have both an answer and probably a quick story. I don't know, who wants to start?
I think attitude is an important part of this answer. So you are prepared, you're competent, you know what you're talking about, you have the ability to lead the conversation to where you need it to go for the right outcome for the organization. But can you be pleasant in that conversation? I pride myself in being able to have difficult conversations with people, but not losing my sense of self and my sense of common decency and being polite and clear and being, I hope, heard clearly, but always maintaining a level of appropriate decorum.
I think that positioning at the table is important in confidence, and you certainly don't want to be at the back of the room. I think sitting at the table, at the front of the room, in a position where you can be heard, I think is really important. Look at the dynamic going on around you and figure out how you can be most effective in that area, so that you can present yourself in the way that you want to.
I have two things to say about that. First, it's an evolutionary skill. You evolve it over the course of your career. I spent many meetings, throughout my early career and mid-career, really not knowing when to inject myself. And other people were making the point, so I didn't really need to repeat it. But then it occurred to me to really start to see who was weighing in on what. And I realized that a lot of the people that were spending a lot of time talking were really just repeating a lot of the points that were made before, weren't saying anything new. I said, well, I wouldn't do that, but I could do it, And at some point you realize, hey, I know that, I know this, and I have something that the rest of this group could benefit from. And maybe it's awkward at first, and maybe it is that risky moment where you have this embarrassing moment where you say a lot of stuff and everybody just looks at you because you never really said anything before and doesn't know what to do with it. But you have to go with it. Have that confidence in yourself to go out there and add something intelligent to the conversation. And then, then you're in a place where you can build off. And then people know, hey, she doesn't say a lot, but when she says something, it really seems to, add to our understanding of what's going on, or it brings another perspective. So I would counsel you on that front. And in terms of, confidence at this level, at this point in my career, I think that we've all been down a road, right? It's been a bumpy road at times. You know that you can fall apart and pull yourself back up together and get back on that road. It's not the end. It's not the embarrassment or the end of the show that you think it might be before you get there. I think it's important when leading a meeting, when there's dissension, when there's multiple points of view, to be direct. Nobody wants to try to interpret what you're saying. I hear you saying this, but you're really meaning that. To be direct, and then to also be open to other points of view, to listen to those other points of view, to sort of sum up. I think there's a very good point of view on this side that's saying there's a lot of benefits to making this investment over here, but on the other side, we have a lot of maintenance requirements that we're responsible for, and we have to balance those two. So know your material. Be direct in what you're saying so people don't have to sort of wade through what you're saying, but also be open to the other points of view and respect for the other points of view.
Right. Being prepared so that the answer that you're inserting is right is the most important thing. But I think also it's one of those experiences where the first time is the hardest, and so it's sort of like asking for a raise. That or the salary that you deserve, that first conversation is like brutally hard, and then the second time you do it, it's much, much easier, and pretty soon you've done it enough times that you know how to handle it and you know how to ask for it. And so I think, you got to know your material, and then in the meeting, it's one thing when you're running the meeting, it's another thing when you are, just a participant and there are a bunch of other folks running the meeting, and you have to just sort of either jump in there and either advise your boss who's in the meeting with you on what the right answer is, or just say, I think the answer you're looking for is X, or I've been working on this for quite some time and what I found is Y, or I looked at all of the numbers and all of the information and this is what I've come up with. And you just got to kind of get it in there, and the first time is the worst. Right?
I agree with all of that. I mean, I think that the three things that I would say is, number one, people call me calm. I think being calm is really important. Because I think actually as a woman, I think being calm is especially important. Just not to let things phase you, just to be very calm. I think the other thing, to Sarah's point, is being prepared. I think being prepared is extremely important, because that's where the respect comes from. If people know what you're talking about, even if they don't agree with you, you'll get that respect. And the last thing I think, which is really important, is being decisive. Sort of making the decision, communicating the decision, and moving on. I think especially in this capacity, in this role, I think, sort of being confident in terms of being, able to sort of make a decision and stick to it and then move on from that, I think is incredibly important.
I'll just add, and I know Danielle, she works on a very important a team, our scheduling and consensus planning team, and I've enjoyed working with her. And I'll just add, I would also say, as much as, again, I believe you must be prepared, but don't be afraid to make mistakes. And sometimes you can hold yourself back because you might be wrong, and I'll say 9 times out of 10 on operational issues, because I'm learning every day. You can never know everything. I'll be wrong, but I also want to insert myself and say this is an important issue for me, and put it out there. And there's a lot of risk in that too. You're putting yourself out of your comfort zone. You don't want to make it a habit. She doesn't know anything that's going on, right? But you want to at least, if you have a legitimate question and it's part of the conversation, put it out there. But then to invoke again, Kathy brought up Sheryl Sandberg. Sarah worked for Sheryl Sandberg. I'm sort of a disciple of Sheryl Sandberg's, because after I read Lean In, there were just so many elements in that book about leaning in, being at the table, asserting yourself, making your voice heard, because we know there are many times we are the only woman at the table. And so if you're not saying anything, in some respects, you're letting down the sisterhood, right? You know, we gotta, you know, we need to make sure we're there. And when we're really the lone woman at the table, it does put even a little more pressure on us. And so I think there's absolutely, you want to be prepared, but don't be afraid and don't be too hard on yourself too. I think we're here, right? We're achievers. We want to do better, and we can be our own worst critics too. And so sometimes, and I think when I'm, especially with younger women, they're saying, well, I didn't do this, I didn't do this. But give yourself a break. We're humans, right? To err is human. So, but don't be afraid to assert yourself.
Okay, so let's do like a quick lightning round. So if that, because we've only got a few minutes left. So maybe I'll throw something out there and then jump in and don't, you know, whoever wants to jump in, jump in. And you don't have to give a long explanation. You could just be brief. Okay, so best piece of advice you have ever been given in your career? Pause. They're like, no, that one wasn't good. No, that one was.
Success comes when preparation. I have two. That's why I was trying to figure it out. Success comes when preparation meets opportunity.
Nice. Anyone else?
Be enthusiastic.
Care enough to risk failure.
I guess I'm going to take a page out of my son's book again. Face your fears.
Never let them see you sweat.
Yeah, that's a great one. One, and I feel like now I'm actually repeating myself. I was going to say one piece of advice you would give this room, which you may have already just said, but if you had one piece of advice to give this room.
Just keep on doing what you're doing. I mean, you're here, you want to progress, you know there are opportunities out there, so reach out, you know, create those networks within your organization, join those professional networks, the WTS networks, and be the leader of your own group and try to encourage people into the organizations, try to encourage people through from each and every standpoint that we have represented in the room.
Don't be afraid.
Be the author of your story. Don't just be a character in your book.
That's what that's what I was going to say too. I don't have until Sue said it, I didn't have the perfect words for it, but that is what I've always used in my career is your life and your career are not what's in front of you. It's going around the obstacle, thinking outside the box, making your career what you want it to be.
I was going to say, don't hold yourself back. I mean, there's plenty of opportunities out there. There are plenty of obstacles on your path. Don't put your own obstacles on your path. Don't sort of self-select and hold yourself back.
I would just say, before you leave here today, try to get to know someone that you haven't met. You know, this is a great group and from different parts of MTA and Amtrak. And also to the men that are here, I thank you for coming. At Amtrak Notch 8, it's a women-led organization, but it is very inclusive, and we welcome our male colleagues. The only way we're going to grow is by working together and collaborating and knowing more about what makes each other tick. So let's, before you leave today, hopefully we get a chance to say hello, and this partnership and hopefully these opportunities, this is the first of many more to come.
That seems like a great place to wrap it up, actually. Thank you all for coming. Thank you to this team up here, too.
I just want to thank Caroline. This is really Caroline's brainchild. Amtrak actually paid for the refreshments today, so thank you to Amtrak.
It's a lot more food.
And there's a lot more food. So thank you, Caroline, for really being the driving force behind this. It was really a wonderful event to be part of.
Well, thank you, Kathy, and thanks to Tony Greco also for helping pull us all together and all of the panelists. So thanks, everyone. Have a great week. This is for our panelists, sorry. Eunice Kim, who's my colleague here in New York, we have a little gift for our panelists.
Oh, thank you so much.
This has our Notch 8 logo.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, and there's a lapel pin as well. There you go.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Notch 8.
And I want to thank Eunice, too, for all your help with this event today. Thank you.
Okay.